Miami has done it again for the second straight year. A team that at one point looked like they could potentially be the best team in the country has lost themselves out of just a golden position. This is all coming off the heels of Miami losing at SMU, which is their second ACC loss of the season so far. They lost to Louisville a couple weeks ago. That was a loss I looked at with a level of discernment in the sense that I actually think Louisville's a really good team, and that is something that they do every single year. Jeff Brom is one of the most underrated coaches in college football, and he just has a knack at ruining somebody's season every year. That's something he's very good at, so I looked at that as a one-off because I was like, well, Carson Beck threw 4 interceptions. It was just a weird game, weird energy, and then bam, and Mario Cristobal, the Miami November special, out of the playoffs, most likely after a loss to SMU this weekend on the road. SMU played fine. Like, it wasn't a life-changing performance by the Mustangs, and this is definitely an SMU team that is not nearly as good as last year's SMU team. This was a game that, once again, it sort of felt like Miami lost. SMU had 25 rushing yards this game. 25. Miami manages to lose that game. Miami had almost 100 penalty yards. Penalties that could very easily be avoided with a more well-disciplined team. Things that come down to coaching and preparation. SMU claws, fights their way back into this, sends this into overtime. And Carson Beck does what Carson Beck does. And in overtime, you got a glimpse of what Georgia fans have been barking about. That was clever. For the last year. Carson Beck is not going to win you games. Carson Beck is going to make a disastrous mistake late in the game. It happened against Louisville. And it happened again against SMU with a dumb interception. An interception that was entirely Carson Beck's fault. Threw it right to the defender. Whoops. And I don't know if any of you are football fans, but it is not a good idea to throw an interception in overtime. It's actually a pretty bad one. SMU was then able to score, wins the game, knocks off top 10 Miami. What I really want to talk about with this game specifically is just the pattern it follows with Mario Cristobal and how, not to quote Maya Angelou when talking about the Miami Hurricanes, but when someone shows you who you are the first time, believe them. And that's kind of the situation you're in with Carson Beck, because the Louisville loss was bad. 4 interceptions in a game is not ideal. A back-breaking interception to end a game, not ideal. To do that shit again against SMU, and both times after this happens, Carson Beck, who you've been in college a long time, you are the leader of this team, you are the representative of Miami Hurricanes football, to go out in your press conference and throw somebody else under the bus, not a good look. When the first time you did it, you had to apologize. This time, at least you didn't call out your receivers and you called out your coaching staff instead. And it shows you how this team is falling apart every week. And what I think the unique juxtaposition of this game was, this was in the noon slot, the 3:30 slot. Georgia played Florida, and you saw Gunnar Stockton do something that Carson Beck can't. In a close game, in a rivalry game, and maybe not a must-win game for Georgia, but it is in the sense of, like, you're playing Florida and you want to beat Florida. Gunnar Stockton was able to take his team in the fourth quarter and win that game. That is not what Carson Beck did. And so that is looking like an investment that may not have paid off and might be causing more problems than it's worth, because Carson Beck currently is tied for 3rd nationally with 9 interceptions on the year. But despite the fact that, yes, Carson Beck's interception is what sealed this game for SMU, obviously you're in a position where Mario Cristobal, this keeps happening to you, and at a certain point, it's your fault. I mean, I think it's always been your fault, but it's your fault. Some fun little statistics I like that made me giggle. In the month of November, Mario Cristobal is 4-8. I believe it's 4-11 in November and December. He is 7-5 in his last 12 games. 4 of those losses have been when Miami was at least a touchdown favorite. And this is all coming with a Mario Cristobal recruiting class. He's a great recruiter. This is a top 15 recruiting class, and you've wasted it by November. And the same thing with last year. You took the generational talent that is Cam Ward and wasted it because your defense was so bad. Now this time around, you take a generational talent in Ruben Bain and you waste it because you guys can't fix simple procedural issues, because Carson Beck cannot hold on to the ball in a late game important situation. These are Mario Cristobal issues. And now the ACC is wide open with the exception of Miami. I am not an ACC hater. I mean, I do think it's fun to make fun of. This is a silly conference. Duke is in the picture after beating Clemson this weekend. Virginia undefeated in conference play. I understand Georgia Tech lost to NC State, and that was an ugly loss, and then there's some weird stuff happening there. But Georgia Tech is still alive. I think SMU needs help, but they're still alive. Miami who is far and away the most talented team in that conference, is not contending anymore. And if this happens once, this happens once. But this has now happened multiple times, where the exact same thing happened last season, where Miami had everything in front of them and they threw it all away. And they did it again this year. When that stuff happens in such a repeatable pattern, and it happens the same way, and it happens all under the same guy, it's probably not a coincidence. I'm not a Miami fan, and I think you guys know I actually like when Miami loses because it makes me laugh because it's funny. But if I were a fan, I would be incredibly frustrated with this, because it has to be exhausting to watch your head coach, who brings in so much talent, continuously waste that talent. And to watch him make in-game decisions that you are like, I don't know if there's anything going on upstairs. You've spent all this money on a quarterback who has not lived up to what money you should have paid him, the expectations, and has kind of been unpleasant in the process, where, you know, if you lose like that, that's brutal. Your quarterback coming out and making like little like backhanded comments about his wide receivers and his coaches doesn't help anything, especially when Miami is already a school that like attention is placed on, and it's usually not in a positive light. It just feels like such a major flop on the Carson Beck side. It feels like a bigger flop on the Mario Cristobal side. And you wonder, you're like, you bring in a new defensive coordinator last year. You bring in, you know, a completely new defense. You have this quarterback that was supposed to be, you know, the savior, even though Georgia fans have been telling you forever that he's not. You did all the things you were supposed to do, and yet the late season collapse continues to happen. You have to get to the point where you're asking, well, what more could you change to fix this before we realize that this is not a fixable problem and that you are the problem? And I'm not saying Miami should fire Mario Cristobal. That's a crazy conversation, especially to have this season. But I don't know. I certainly wouldn't be happy if I'm a Miami fan. If you like this video and you want to chat more college football throughout the season, please subscribe. It is the best way for me to talk some ball.